Hi, boys and girls. All right, let's review our sounds. We have O-R, porch, scorch, horn, O-A, moan, float, cloak. We have O consonant E, choke, phone, globe. And we have O-R-E, score, shore, chore. Make sure you're spending a lot of time on these studying this week. They're kind of confusing. All right, let's review our vocabulary. I don't have to add anything new. Biography, we started it yesterday, the true story of someone's life. And then emancipate means to set free. Now, like I said, we're going to continue with Abraham Lincoln by Augusta Stevenson. Yesterday we read the last chapter first. Now, I want you to look at it. We have our table of contents. So our author is organizing the information in chapters. We have Abe's first toy, school butter, grandfather and the Indians, Sarah and Abe go fishing. So we can kind of tell what each chapter is going to be about. All right, we're going to start with chapter 1, Abe's first toy. And here's a picture of him, and it looks like he's a hard worker. There was once a little boy who lived in a little cabin on a little farm in a little clearing on a little creek. Now this little creek had a little name, Knob, but the boy had a big name, Abraham. Little Knob Creek was in the great big state of Kentucky. Abraham was born February 12th, 1809, on another farm about 10 miles away. This farm was not on Knob Creek, but it was in the great big state of Kentucky. Little Abraham was in the great big family of Lincolns. There were his father and mother, and older sister Sarah. He lived with them, of course. Then there were many aunts and uncles. There were more cousins than he could count. He didn't see any of his relatives very often because they lived too far away. Nobody in the Lincoln family called Abraham by his big name. Abraham is too long, everyone agreed. Abe is better. So Abe he was to his family and friends. The name stayed with him even when he became a man and as long as he lived. Abe liked his home on Knob Creek, but sometimes he wished that the Lincoln farm was not so far from other farms. The nearest neighbors lived miles away in other clearings in the forest. They lived too far away for him to play with any of their children. Sarah played with Abe when she had time, but she liked to play with dolls. Abe couldn't help wishing that he had a brother or some other boy to play with. A boy would like to do the same things that he liked to do. Sarah's doll. One morning, Abe and Sarah were playing outdoors. Before long, Sarah came into the cabin crying. "Oh, Mother," she said, "Abe won't play with me." Mrs. Lincoln was surprised. "What is the matter?" she asked. "Have you children been quarreling?" That means fighting. "No, Mother, we didn't quarrel, but Abe wouldn't play with my doll. It's a new doll, too, and it's made from the largest corn cob Father could find." "That's true," said Mr. Lincoln. "It was the largest one on the field." "It's a fine doll," Sarah said, "Mother. Why doesn't Abe like it?" "I don't know," said Sarah. "He said he wouldn't play with girl games anymore." "Well, well," said Mother. "I'm surprised to hear that Abe won't play with a doll." "Ha ha," laughed Father. "Abe is growing up, Nancy." "But he's only 5½ Thomas." "He is growing up just the same. You must play something else with Abe, Sarah." "There isn't anything else to play, Father." "If only they had some toys, they could play better," said Mother. "I suppose they could," said Father, "but toys cost money, and I haven't finished paying for this farm." "Abe wants a little wagon," said Sarah. "Couldn't you make one, Thomas?" asked Mrs. Lincoln. "You are such a good carpenter. You make our wooden plates." A carpenter is somebody who makes things out of wood. "Of course I could make a little wagon," said Mr. Lincoln, "but I won't have time this summer. Maybe I can next winter." "But Abe needs something to play with now," said Mother. "He is so lonesome. Sarah helps me with the work, and that leaves Abe alone so much. No little boys to play with, no one but just himself." "I'll tell you what I'll do," said Father. "I'm going to Thomas Hall's sale this morning to buy some tools, and if I can find a toy wagon, I'll buy it. That is, if it doesn't cost too much." "Oh, of course," said Mother, "if it doesn't cost too much." The sale. The Halls were going to move away. Almost everything they owned was for sale, and people came from miles around to buy. Mr. Lincoln met the neighbors from up the creek and down the creek and over the hills. They were all glad to see him. They liked him, and besides, he was the best judge of horses in this part of Kentucky. "I've been waiting for you, Thomas," said the man. "I want to buy a horse, but I want your opinion first." Mr. Lincoln examined the horse carefully and told the man what it was worth. Now I can make a connection here. In our Jackie Robinson book, we learned that to judge means to form an opinion. So a judge must be a person who forms the opinion. So Abe's father is a good judge of horses. That means he must be able to tell if the horse is fast or strong and healthy. And I'm going to show you a quick picture of them judging the horses. And I want to explain something, that this book was written in the early 1800s. The story takes place in the early 1800s. And they didn't have moving companies. They didn't have cars and trucks. And so when a family had to move to a new farm, they had to load up their wagon. So they could only take with them what could go in the wagon or what they could carry. So a lot of times they had to leave stuff behind and buy new stuff when they got to their new place or make new stuff. And so that's why they're having a sale. Then the other men asked him about horses and kept him busy so long that he forgot all about a toy wagon for Abe. At last he bought his tools and told his friends goodbye. As he went for his horse, two men passed him. They were carrying a long settee. It's like an old-timey sofa. "I hope this will go in my wagon," said one. "Wagon," said Mr. Lincoln out loud. "Oh, yes, wagon." Then he hurried back to the cabin and began to look about. On a table were dishes, forks, knives, spoons, buckets, pots, and pans. On the floor there were feather beds, pillows, coverlets, quilts, and skins. There seemed to be everything but toys. "What are you looking for, Mr. Lincoln?" asked Mrs. Hall. "Perhaps I can help you." "I want a little toy wagon for Abe, Mrs. Hall, but I don't see any toys." Mrs. Hall laughed. "Look up there," she said. She pointed to the shelf over the fireplace. Mr. Lincoln looked up. Then he laughed, for there was a little toy wagon. "I have 10 cents I can spend," he said. "It's yours," said Mrs. Hall. "See, it's marked 8 cents. "Good," said Mr. Lincoln. He paid the money, took the wagon, and started for the little log cabin on Knob Creek. Abe watches. Outside this cabin on a stump sat a little black-haired boy watching the road. He looked and he looked, but his father did not come. His mother had said that father would be home for supper, but supper was over and he hadn't come. Now the sun was going down behind the hill. Soon it would be dark. "Abe," called Mrs. Lincoln from the door. "It's too late for you to be outside." "May I wait till father comes?" "No, Abe, it's too damp. You'll get chilled." Abe went into the cabin at once. "Why, Abe," said Sarah, "you're crying." "I want my wagon," said Abe. Mother put her arms around the boy and spoke to him gently. "Abe," she said, "father wasn't sure he could find a wagon, was he?" "No," said Abe. "And he wasn't sure that he would have enough money to buy it, was he?" "No," said Abe. "Then you shouldn't be crying when he comes home. It will make him feel bad." "I won't cry any more," said Abe. "That's fine," said Mother. "Sarah, Abe is a little man. Don't tell father he cried." "I won't," said Sarah, "but father might lose the wagon on the way home." "Lose it?" Abe said. "How could he lose it?" "It might fall in the creek, or he couldn't get it out," said Sarah. "Or maybe he wouldn't even know it fell." Abe's lips trembled. He looked as if he were going to cry again. "Yes," said Mother, "all of those things might happen." She smiled at Abe, and Abe smiled back. Then he said bravely, "I won't cry anyway." Just then the door opened, and in came Mr. Lincoln. "Here's your wagon, Abe," he said. "Oh," said Abe. "Oh, oh." That was all Abe could say. Abe pulled the wagon over to the fireplace. He sat down on the floor and turned the wagon upside down. With his fingers, he made the wheels go round and round. After a while, he turned the wagon right side up again and began to pull it around the room. "Will you drive my doll in your wagon, Abe?" Sarah asked. Before Abe could answer, Mother said, "Wait until tomorrow, Sarah. Abe has waited so long for his wagon. Just let him do whatever he wants with it tonight." "Oh, I'd like to give the doll a ride," said Abe. "That's not like playing with one." Back and forth Abe pulled the wagon. There wasn't a happier boy in the world that night than little Abe Lincoln. And that's the end of our chapter. So let's talk about it for just a second. How would you describe Abe? he's a good boy, and he's trying hard to be brave, and he's excited about the wagon. When Abe's father says that he can't afford to take the time off to make the wagon, that's because he has so much to do around the farm that he doesn't have a lot of spare time. In those days, they worked from the time they got up until the time they went to sleep, and so there wasn't a lot of extra time. So I'm surprised that there just happened to be a little wagon, but how wonderful Abe, and I think Abe will have a good time playing with his wagon. Thanks for listening, and we'll read some more tomorrow.